Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The world of Port Charles is one built on a foundation of perpetual turmoil, where love is often a prelude to betrayal, and happiness is merely the calm before an inevitable, devastating storm. It is a place where the past is never truly buried, but rather lies in wait, ready to resurface with catastrophic consequences. In this meticulously crafted universe of daytime drama, few events resonate with the seismic force of a murder, and even fewer are those that intertwine the fates of its characters with the stark, unyielding realities of the world beyond the screen. The fictional death of Alexis Davis at the hands of Rick Lansing, and the subsequent, very real termination of the actress who portrayed her, Nancy Lee Grahn, from ABC's General Hospital, created a confluence of fiction and reality so dramatic it threatened to destabilize the very fabric of the show itself. This was not merely a plot point, it was a cataclysm. To understand the profound impact of this event, one must first appreciate the stature of Alexis Davis within the narrative tapestry of General Hospital. She was not a fleeting character, a villain of the month, or a temporary love interest. Alexis was an institution. Introduced as a sharp, ambitious, and deeply flawed lawyer, she evolved over decades into a cornerstone of the canvas. She was a Davis, a name synonymous with power and corruption in Port Charles, and her lifelong struggle was to distance herself from that toxic legacy while simultaneously being drawn back into its orbit. She was a mother, fiercely protective of her daughters, Sam, Christina, and Molly, her love for them serving as both her greatest strength and her most exploitable weakness. She was a recovering alcoholic, her battles with addiction portrayed with a raw, unflinching honesty that resonated with countless viewers. She was a survivor of psychological trauma, her struggles with bipolar disorder woven into her character arc with a sensitivity that earned the show and the actress widespread acclaim. Alexis was, in essence, a profoundly human character in a world of often outlandish plot devices. She was brilliant yet self-destructive, strong-willed yet vulnerable, a pillar of moral authority who was constantly confronting her own ethical failings. Her relationships were complex and defining. Her tumultuous, star-crossed romance with Sonny Corinthos, the city's dominant mob boss, was a central pillar of the show for years, a forbidden attraction that explored the gray areas between love, morality, and complicity. Her friendships, particularly with the stalwart Max Scorpio and the compassionate Sam McCall, provided some of the show's most grounded and heartfelt moments. To eliminate such a character was not a decision to be taken lightly, it was to remove a vital organ from the body of the show. Rick Lansing, the instrument of her demise, was a character whose very existence was defined by shadow and resentment. The half-brother of Sonny Corinthos, Rick was a man perpetually living in his brother's formidable shadow. Where Sonny was charismatic and powerful, Rick was cunning and manipulative. His love for Elizabeth Weber was possessive and obsessive, and his moral compass was notoriously flexible. He was a lawyer like Alexis, but he used the law as a weapon, whereas she, at her best, sought to use it as a shield for the innocent. Their paths had crossed numerous times, often as adversaries in the courtroom, sometimes as reluctant allies in the tangled web of Port Charles intrigues. There was always a tension between them, a professional respect laced with deep-seated personal distrust. Rick saw in Alexis a reflection of the Corinthos world he both despised and coveted, while Alexis saw in Rick a dangerous and unpredictable force, a man whose ambition could easily curdle into malice. The setup for the fatal confrontation was a masterpiece of slow-burning suspense. It did not erupt from a vacuum but was the culmination of months, even years, of carefully laid narrative groundwork. Alexis, in her role as a journalist and truth-seeker following her disbarment, had begun digging into a new, insidious threat to Port Charles, a corporate conglomerate that was a front for a sophisticated human trafficking ring. Her investigation was tireless, driven by her innate sense of justice and her need to atone for past mistakes. Unbeknownst to her, Rick Lansing had become entangled with this very organization. His reasons were classic Rick, a mixture of financial gain, a twisted desire for power that could rival his brother's, and perhaps a lingering bitterness toward a world he felt had never given him his due. As Alexis's investigation drew closer to the truth, the danger around her intensified. There were warnings, veiled threats, a break-in at her apartment, the ominous sense that she was being watched. Her daughters, particularly Sam and Molly, pleaded with her to drop the story, to let the police handle it. But Alexis, in her characteristic stubbornness, believed she was on the verge of a breakthrough that could shatter the entire operation. The crucial piece of evidence was a ledger, a digital file detailing the conglomerate's illicit transactions and its key players. Through a series of clever maneuvers, Alexis managed to obtain a copy. The scene of the confrontation was set in Alexis's penthouse apartment, a space that had been the site of so much of her life: family dinners, romantic trysts, devastating breakdowns, and quiet moments of recovery. It was late. The city lights of Port Charles glittered outside the panoramic windows, a beautiful, indifferent backdrop to the tragedy about to unfold. Alexis was at her desk, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her determined face. She had just finished compiling her evidence and was preparing to send it to the district attorney. The sense of triumph was palpable. She had done it. She had exposed the corrupt and protected the innocent. It was at this moment of victory that a floorboard creaked. She turned, and there he was. Rick Lansing emerged from the shadows of her living room, his expression not one of rage, but of a cold, resigned inevitability. The dialogue that followed was a masterclass in tension, a verbal duel between two brilliant legal minds who knew exactly what was at stake. "Alexis," Rick said, his voice deceptively calm. "I wish you hadn't gone this far." Alexis's initial shock quickly gave way to a dawning, horrifying comprehension. She stood up, backing away from her desk, her body positioned between Rick and the laptop. "Rick? What are you doing here? How did you get in?" "You always were the smartest person in any room," Rick replied, taking a slow step forward. "But sometimes, intelligence isn't enough. Sometimes, discretion is the better part of valor. You should have practiced discretion." "It's you," she whispered, the pieces clicking into a terrible mosaic. "You're involved with them. The trafficking, the money laundering, all of it." "Involved is such a passive word," Rick countered, a faint, bitter smile touching his lips. "I helped build the legal framework that made it all possible. I ensured its profitability. It was a business, Alexis. A very, very lucrative business." "It's slavery, Rick," she fired back, her voice rising with outrage. "It's human misery. How could you? You're a lawyer. You took an oath." "Oaths are just words," he sneered, his calm beginning to fracture. "And words are my specialty. Just like they're yours. But your words are about to become very dangerous to me. You need to give me the file." "No," Alexis stated, her voice firm despite the fear coursing through her. "It's already over. I've copied it. I've sent it to contacts. If anything happens to me, it all gets released." It was a bluff, a desperate gambit, and Rick, a master manipulator, saw right through it. "I don't think you have," he said, his eyes flicking to the laptop. "You're too thorough, too meticulous. You wouldn't send it until you were 100% certain it was perfect. You were just about to, weren't you?" But I interrupted. "So, this ends now. Give me the laptop." He moved toward her. Alexis, acting on pure instinct, grabbed a heavy crystal vase from her desk and hurled it at him. Rick dodged it easily, the vase shattering against the wall with an explosive crash. The sound seemed to break the last vestiges of his control. This was no longer a negotiation, it was a struggle for survival. He lunged for the laptop. Alexis fought back with a ferocity born of maternal protection and righteous fury. She wasn't just fighting for her life, she was fighting for all the nameless, faceless victims of the organization Rick represented. They grappled, a chaotic, brutal dance in the elegant confines of her home. She scratched at his face, kicked, screamed. He was stronger, more desperate. In the struggle, they knocked over a floor lamp, plunging part of the room into deeper shadow, the remaining light casting long, monstrous silhouettes. Rick's hands found their way to her throat. It wasn't a premeditated act of murder, but an escalation of the fight, a brutal attempt to subdue her, to make her let go. But he didn't let go. The pressure intensified. Alexis's eyes, wide with terror and disbelief, locked with his. Her struggles began to weaken, her hands clawing futilely at his wrists. The world, once so sharp and clear, began to tunnel into darkness. The sounds of their struggle, the ragged gasps, the grunts of effort, faded into a distant, muffled roar, and then, into silence. When Rick finally released his grip, it was too late. Alexis Davis slumped to the floor, her body limp, her lifeless eyes staring up at the ceiling. The frantic energy of the moment evaporated, replaced by a chilling, absolute stillness. Rick stood over her, his chest heaving, his own face a mask of shock and horror at what he had done. This was not part of the plan. This was a catastrophic mistake. He looked from her body to the laptop, the catalyst for this ruin. He snatched it from the desk, his movements jerky and panicked. With one last, haunted look at the woman he had just killed, Rick Lansing fled into the night, leaving behind only the echo of his crime. The aftermath in Port Charles was one of collective, profound grief. The discovery of Alexis's body by her daughter, Molly, was a scene of almost unwatchable heartbreak. The news spread through the city like a shockwave, touching every corner of the community. The Quartermaine mansion, Kelly's diner, the hospital, the police precinct, all were united in a state of disbelief and mourning. Sam's rage, Christina's devastation, Molly's trauma, Sonny's quiet, simmering fury, these emotional responses became the driving force of the narrative for weeks. The hunt for Rick Lansing was on, a manhunt fueled by a personal vendetta as much as by a desire for justice. The storyline was a critical success, praised for its raw emotional power and its daring choice to kill off a legacy character. The performances, particularly from the actors playing Alexis's daughters and from the actor portraying a guilt-ridden, fugitive Rick, were universally lauded. The fictional world of Port Charles had been irrevocably altered. But then, the real-world storm hit, and it was a tempest that would make the on-screen drama pale in comparison. The news broke not in a soap opera magazine, but in the sober pages of a major industry trade publication. Nancy Lee Grahn, the award-winning actress who had brought Alexis Davis to life for over 2 decades, had been fired by ABC. The reason cited was budgetary cuts, a common, often unquestioned justification in the volatile television industry. But the timing was impossibly suspicious. To the devoted viewership and to industry insiders alike, the sequence of events was glaringly obvious. The character was killed off, and then, almost immediately, the actress was let go. The official narrative from the network and the show's producers was a masterclass in corporate PR speak. They expressed their deep gratitude for Nancy Lee Grahn's immense contributions to General Hospital, praised her talent and dedication, and framed the decision as a painful but necessary creative restructuring and cost-saving measure to ensure the long-term health of the series. They spoke of wanting to take the show in a new direction and the difficulty of saying goodbye to beloved characters and the actors who portray them. This sanitized, corporate explanation was met with immediate and widespread skepticism. The fanbase, a passionate and deeply loyal community, revolted. Social media platforms became ground zero for their outrage. The hashtag Justice for Nancy began trending globally. Petitions demanding her reinstatement gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures in a matter of days. Online forums dedicated to the show were flooded with angry posts, with fans dissecting the timeline and pointing out the sheer absurdity of the budget cuts excuse for an actress whose character was just at the center of the show's most prominent and critically acclaimed storyline. The truth, as it so often does, began to leak out through the cracks in the official story. Anonymous sources, purportedly from within the General Hospital production team, began speaking to entertainment journalists. The story they told was far more complex and far less flattering to the network. The budget cuts were indeed a factor, but they were a smokescreen for a deeper, more personal conflict. The narrative emerged of a growing tension between Nancy Lee Grahn and the show's head writer and executive producer. According to these insiders, Grahn, a veteran of the show and a respected figure, had become increasingly vocal with her criticisms of the writing for her character and for the show as a whole. She felt that Alexis was being sidelined, her rich history and complexity reduced to a series of reactive plot points. She was particularly opposed to the decision to have her character killed off, arguing that it was a short-sighted move that destroyed years of character development and severed a vital connection to the show's past. The discussions, once professional disagreements, had reportedly grown increasingly heated. The decision to kill Alexis was, in this version of events, not just a creative choice, but the ultimate power play, a definitive way to silence a dissenting voice. Her firing was not a consequence of the character's death, the character's death was the prelude to her firing. Nancy Lee Grahn's own response was measured, but telling. She did not engage in a public, bitter war of words. Instead, she released a statement expressing her love for the fans and her gratitude for her time on General Hospital. She spoke of being proud of the work she had done and the stories she had helped tell. It was a classy, dignified exit. However, in subsequent interviews and on her social media, she began to hint at the lack of creative respect for veteran actors in the daytime genre and the challenging environment behind the scenes. She never named names, but her message was clear: this was not an amicable parting of ways. The fallout was significant and multifaceted. The first and most immediate casualty was the narrative integrity of General Hospital itself. The death of Alexis Davis, once a powerful, tragic story, was now tainted. Every scene of mourning, every character's grief-stricken monologue, was now viewed by the audience through a lens of bitter meta-commentary. It was impossible to separate the character's death from the actress's firing. The real-world injustice overshadowed the fictional tragedy, robbing it of its emotional purity and making it feel cheap and tawdry. Furthermore, the show faced a significant credibility crisis. How could the producers claim to be telling compelling, character-driven stories when they were so willing to dispose of one of their most well-developed characters in what appeared to be an act of petty retaliation? The trust between the show and its audience, a fragile and essential bond in the world of serialized storytelling, was severely damaged. Ratings, which had initially spiked due to the shocking death, began to dip as a segment of the audience tuned out in protest. The industry repercussions were also notable. The Screen Actors Guild American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, SAG-AFTRA, was reportedly monitoring the situation, though no formal action was taken. The case became a talking point in broader discussions about the treatment of veteran actors, particularly women, in television. It highlighted the power dynamics at play, where even a beloved and long-serving performer could be deemed expendable when they challenged the authority of the writers and producers. For Rick Lansing's character, the act of murder marked a point of no return. He was no longer a complicated anti-hero or a charming rogue, he was a cold-blooded killer. His eventual capture and trial provided a new wave of story, but it was a story burdened by the off-screen controversy. His motivations felt hollow, his fate less consequential, because the audience knew his most heinous act was as much a product of behind-the-scenes strife as it was of in-character development. In the years that have followed, the ghost of Alexis Davis, and of Nancy Lee Grahn's tenure, has continued to linger over Port Charles. Her daughters frequently reference her, and her absence is felt at major family events, a constant, painful reminder of what was lost. The show has attempted to introduce new, strong female characters to fill the void, but they have struggled to capture the unique combination of intelligence, vulnerability, and history that Alexis embodied. The firing of Nancy Lee Grahn following the killing of Alexis Davis remains one of the most controversial and impactful events in modern soap opera history. It serves as a stark case study in the complex and often fraught relationship between art and business, between character and actor, and between a television show and its audience. It demonstrated that the most dramatic stories sometimes happen not in front of the camera, but in the executive suites and writers' rooms, where decisions are made that can forever alter the landscape of a fictional world and shatter the illusions that sustain it. The death of Alexis Davis was a fictional tragedy, but the firing of Nancy Lee Grahn was a real one, a reminder that in the world of entertainment, the lines between the two are often perilously thin, and the consequences of blurring them can be devastating. The echo of that single, fateful decision, to end a character and a career in one fell swoop, resonates to this day, a permanent scar on the history of General Hospital. The build-up to Alexis's death has been meticulously crafted by the show's writers. In recent episodes, tensions have escalated after Rick's involvement in a scheme that threatened the stability of Port Charles. He had been held captive in a basement, cheeking his medications to maintain his lucidity, all while plotting his escape. The dagger that becomes the instrument of fate is no ordinary weapon, it's the very one used to kill Alexis's mother, a relic from her traumatic past that Jen Sidwell had left in her possession. The irony is palpable, a symbol of her family's cursed legacy now turns against her. Picture the scene, Alexis, alone in her home, the weight of her legal battles and family dramas pressing down on her. The door creaks open, and Rick emerges from the shadows, his eyes burning with a mix of rage and madness. "You thought you could lock me away, Alexis? You thought you could control me?" he snarls, the dagger gleaming under the dim light. Alexis, ever the fighter, stands her ground, her voice steady despite the fear. Rick, this isn't you. Think about Molly. But Rick, unhinged from his captivity, lunges forward. The struggle is brief but intense, a dance of desperation that ends with the dagger finding its mark. Alexis collapses, her life ebbing away as Rick stands over her, horror dawning on his face too late. This moment is not just a death, it's a catalyst. Molly Lansing Davis, played by Kristen Vaganos, will be devastated, her world shattered by the loss of her mother at her father's hands. How will she reconcile her love for Rick with this unforgivable act? Spoilers suggest she'll turn to her half-sister Christina Corinthos Davis for support, strengthening their bond but also drawing them into conflict with the Corinthos family. Sonny Corinthos, Rick's half-brother, might see this as the final straw, leading to a full-blown family war. And what of Ava Jerome, who has recently formed an unlikely alliance with Alexis and Christina? Played by Maura West, Ava's role in the aftermath could be pivotal. In one teaser, Ava arrives just moments too late to intervene, her screams echoing as she discovers the scene. Could this push Ava toward redemption, or will it drag her back into her manipulative ways? But the on-screen drama pales in comparison to the off-screen turmoil surrounding Nancy Lee Grahn. Reports and rumors have swirled that Grahn has been fired from General Hospital, a development that has sent shockwaves through the fanbase. The reasons cited range from her outspoken social media presence to conflicts with production. Grahn, known for her progressive views and vocal commentary on political issues, has faced backlash for posts that some deem controversial. In September 2025, following the fictional assassination of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk, Grahn's Instagram post stated, "I am not in support of what happened to Charlie Kirk, but Charlie Kirk was in support of what happened to Charlie Kirk." This cryptic remark ignited a firestorm, with fans accusing her of lacking empathy and celebrating violence. To understand the gravity of this event, we must delve into the rich history of these characters. Alexis Davis first graced the screens of General Hospital in 1996, portrayed by Nancy Lee Grahn, who brought a sharp wit and legal prowess to the role. Alexis started as a high-powered attorney, often entangled in the Cassadine family's web of intrigue. Her journey has been one of redemption and relapse, from her struggles with alcoholism to her complex romantic entanglements. Rick Lansing, played by Rick Hurst, entered the scene in 2002 as Sonny Corinthos' half-brother, a man driven by ambition and a thirst for revenge. The soap world is never without its fair share of shockers, and once again General Hospital has fans in complete disbelief. Rumors began swirling that Rick Lansing, one of Port Charles's most complicated villains, was set to return to the canvas. But no one could have predicted the massive spoiler twist that suggested Rick might be directly responsible for the death of Alexis Davis. Alexis, a core character who has been an anchor in storylines for decades, played with strength and nuance by Nancy Lee Grahn, has survived everything from mob wars to courtroom battles. Yet if the whispers are true, Alexis may finally meet her fate in a violent and tragic exit at the hands of Rick, and the fallout would not only shake the fictional world of Port Charles but also the daytime television industry as a whole. Longtime viewers know the history between Rick and Alexis has always been murky. Rick is infamous for his manipulations, dark schemes, and morally gray behavior that often dragged others into chaos. Alexis, on the other hand, is a legal powerhouse, a woman who has defended mobsters and citizens alike, all while struggling with her own demons. For years, fans have watched her overcome alcoholism, toxic relationships, and family betrayals, making her one of the most layered women on the canvas. To imagine her being cut down in a shocking act of violence is heartbreaking, but it is the kind of storytelling move that daytime dramas occasionally make to shake up the canvas and remind